Hey everybody, welcome to the Did You Know Crypto Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the so-called toxicity in Bitcoin and Twitter especially. But first, if you could do me a real big favor, go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star and a written review. That is the biggest thing that you can do for me. If you want to do a few more other things, go over to supportmypodcast.com. That is supportmypodcast.com, and you can see all the different ways that you can help me out. And I'm actually going to be creating a supporting listeners basically discount program. There's going to be discounts on things like Keep Keys, Trezor, hardware wallets, Bitcoin merchandise, t-shirt, art, as well as some health food or just health products and things like that that I prefer and that I use myself. And that's at supportmypodcast.com/discounts. It's absolutely free. I don't sell your emails or anything like that. This is kind of getting on a list to let you know once we launch. And in the future, I will be charging for access to this as kind of just basically a way for listeners and supporters to support me financially while also getting more value out of it than I'm actually, asking for. So basically my rule is going to be, if I look at what people probably buy yearly, if they are kind of doing Bitcoin related kind of stuff, as long as I'm delivering about 5 times that value, whatever that number is what I'll charge. So anyways, if you get in early, there will be reduced fees or maybe even free for everybody who starts on that early. Anyways, so let's get into the main topic of the day, or I should say the only topic of the day, which is toxicity in Bitcoin and Twitter. So this was brought on, I believe, by Matt Corallo blocking Samson Mao and making basically a public pronouncement about the toxicity in the Twitterverse. And I'm not sure if that was necessarily the beginning of it, but it's when I kind of first became aware of what was going on, and that kind of spurred a larger discussion. And this is mostly pretty much in the Bitcoin maximalist communities that this was really a thing. I didn't really see spillover per se regarding other projects or anything like that, or maybe it's just because that's the circles that I run in more often these days. But I think in general, Twitter is kind of what people call a toxic place, right? But I think any time that there's the ability to pseudonymously comment on things, people tend to lean in that direction. That's very common. The more anonymous, the more free people feel to say things that they normally wouldn't. And I don't think that I disagree with the concept that some people have that, well, this is bringing, making things worse. I don't think so. I think it exposes who people really are. I don't think that people who in their heart of hearts are good, kind people will become vicious. I don't like to use the word troll because I think that troll itself is a misused word. I think that troll is someone who's trying to accomplish something but is not... Like, they will piss people off and do all that kind of stuff, but they are doing it for a reason. They are doing so as some sort of, in a way, an art form versus just trying to be a jerk. And so I don't like to use that term for people who really go out of their way to just say the most awful things that you can imagine to someone on the internet. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of people are conditioned by society, and rightly so, that there's a code of conduct that you need to abide by to just function in it. And that is a good thing. And that is a good function that society and culture does. Because within different cultures, there's different rules that people are expected to abide by to be allowed, right? So when you see those videos of somebody who more than likely has some sort of mental illness and is on a subway screaming and yelling, you see everybody move away from him, right? Versus someone who's having a quiet conversation with someone on the phone. You don't see everybody jump up and run away. So why is that? It's just sounds coming out of their mouth. It's just movements of their body, just like you would be if you got up to stand up, or if you decided to pick your phone out of your pocket and put it up to your ear and talk to someone who called you. Why are certain movements, certain sounds from our voices, or from our mouths, why do they elicit that response? Because I don't really want to get that deep, but when you think about it in the kind of a very, very basic way, it's like, obviously there are social norms that we all abide by, and we're all expected to, and that is, like I said, a good thing. So a lot of people, I think, for a lot of different reasons, whether they were treated unfairly or picked on, bullied, whatever it may be, have this pent-up rage where they like to take it out where they can. And with pseudonymous or anonymous identities, they are able to do that. So I think it's a lot of just broken people. And I don't think that there's any way to fix that. I think this is the way how things will be. And I don't think this concept of taking away people's anonymity or ability to be anonymous is some sort of fix, because it doesn't fix what led to those people being that way in the first place. Some people may be born with some sort of mental illness that leads them to be that way anyways, but I think the vast majority of people are created when they act that way. But anyways, moving back out to the macro view of kind of talking about Twitter, is that moving within Bitcoin, especially within the crypto space, as it's called, I think that, well, let's focus specifically on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is more than just a piece of software. I think if you haven't figured that out yet, if you stay in this long enough, you will find that truth. Is that this? If you think of, and this is an insight that Vin Armani gave me, is that if you think of Bitcoin as religion, a lot of this stuff makes a lot more sense. The way that people act, the way that people become so passionate about this, the way they decide to exclude, punish others for not towing a line, right? It's very similar to what a religion would do. And if we look back at why is that, there's a couple reasons. I think that if you look at the kind of larger social, political context of where we've been moving since basically the Enlightenment, or so-called Enlightenment, and to even digress even further, I should call my podcast I Digress. But if you actually, what they call the Dark Ages really wasn't at all. There was a lot of writing. There was a lot of consolidation of knowledge. And they call it the Dark Ages, but it was, and to doing so because they want to discredit the periods of when religiosity was at a higher peak. But it was during this time that monks, not, secular scholars, but monks, a lot of them Irish actually, were saving a lot of the knowledge that had been lost or had been left over from the Romans. And it was not, the way that they teach it in a lot of high schools, they act as though, well, the Roman, secular paganist, sophist, empire fell, and then Christianity took over, and then people just lived in these dark ages, right? Until the Enlightenment, when we rediscovered Greco-Roman thought, and in some ways that is true. That there was a lot of Greco-Roman thought that was brought back into kind of the mainstream after the Enlightenment, for better or worse. But it was not as if, in the way that they make it sound like, is that there was some sort of like effort to burn all these books and get rid of this knowledge because it didn't matter. And there were lines of thought within the church that did think that there's no reason why do we need to study this or advance in that way if our main goal is to get to heaven. And within that specific line of thinking, that makes sense. But overall, on the macro view, this is absolutely not the case. And in fact, the Enlightenment would not have been possible without monks and the church. They were the ones who saved all that knowledge. So, but since the Enlightenment, there's been a gradual diminishing of religion, kind of basically religiosity and faith, right, within the Western world. And definitely within the last 100 to 150 years. And traditionally within the post-Christian or within the post-pagan Christian European world, or even within the pagan, I guess you could say as well, is that there were institutions that were mainly religious, that people in that local society basically built themselves around, right? You had church services, festivals throughout the year that would bring the community together, gave them common sense, common purpose, a lot of things relating to harvest, and times of abundance and times of scarcity. And this sort of belief and common belief and common purpose focused around a faith brought people that sense of community that has been 100% necessary to human development and part of our evolution. Humans were not islands unto themselves. There were people that traveled alone, but they're always part of community, part of society. And that's how humanity has advanced and gotten to the point that we live at now. With the loss of religiosity in society now, you see people start to look for that elsewhere. That's why we see veganism. That's why we see, CrossFit. I mean, there's no rational reason that just basically a workout routine with people that happen to be there at the same time would end up overtaking someone's life, right? To the extent. Same thing with veganism. You're just choosing to not eat meat, right? But it becomes this evangelical sort of, where you have to, it's a very evangelical sort of outlook. You see that also in the political sphere. With the waning of the religious right, you start to see the evangelical left start to rear its head. And that is very much indicative of a faith, right? You have very clear dogma that if you do not abide by, do not constantly say that you believe in, you will be cast out. And not only cast out, you will be, your voice will be, silenced. You've committed a sin, right? The sin of not believing that, this or that, whatever. I don't want to get into the political side of that, but you will be shunned from the group. And so people are searching for something to latch onto, and Bitcoin is no different. And this is not a bad thing. So this is one of the reasons that I say that, if you look at Bitcoin as a religion, or why I believe since Vin kind of explained that to me, that's why I believe that this makes a lot more sense. Because of this shift in society, this shift as we've started to move more towards a secularized, right? People are looking for that community, right? And Bitcoin does offer that. But also, if you look at it as Bitcoin as a social movement as well, it's not just technology. There's a reason people don't get excited over the new, I was going to say, Windows 10, but, things like Apple and stuff. You do see people who are somewhat zealous about Apple, but anyways, like, something like, let me look on my keyboard, or I guess Chrome, right? Chrome browser or Google, right? Nobody's like, there are fans of Google and stuff like that, but there's not a lot, like, there's not a social movement, right? Of that you would see the same way that you do with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a social movement, and without zealotry, without rigid ideology, Bitcoin would not be where it's at today, right? The concept that it can't adapt is ridiculous as well, and that's one of the reasons that I have some issues with the maximalist ideal, is because when you start to get really rigid, that's when you end up with something like Bitcoin SV, where it's 0.10 and that is it, the most purest form of the faith there is, I guess. But I also recognize that without zealots, without people who are constantly keeping others in check for their purity, Bitcoin would not have survived. If it was merely just, something that people kind of worked on, was like, oh, this is kind of neat, and then moved on, that's it. But it is the zeal, it is the religiosity that keeps people here, and why you see people having been working on it for 4 or 5, 6 years, or whatever it may be. So I don't necessarily think that the so-called toxicity is a bug, as we like to say in Bitcoin. I don't think that it's a bug. It's just a part of the program. It's a feature. And I think that the sooner people realize that, the sooner that once they realize that this is a matter of faith for a lot of people, the easier it is to understand them and to interact with them, right? So in some cases, you may not be able to interact with somebody who's a very zealotous, is that even the right word? Someone who's a zealot for, say, a specific faith. You know which topics to avoid if you don't want to get into a debate and talk at length about something. And if you decide to go down that path, you know that you are going to be drawn into that sort of thing. What I think a lot of people in this space who kind of came from outside, that were either, journalists or writers for tech, or came from, well, I worked in software development for Microsoft for 15 years or whatever, and now this Bitcoin thing's kind of neat. When they come into this space, they think, oh, we're just talking about software. We're just talking about this. Like, I don't understand why people get so wound up. And there's a period of time where I also thought the same thing. Like, why do people get so wound up? Let's just all be friends. But if we'll all be friends, Bitcoin would have been dead before any of us would have heard about it. The meme of Bitcoin draws people in to have very polarized, very strong feelings, and to develop a zeal. If it didn't, it would be dead. And some people's polarized opinions, some people's zeal, was the Bitcoin meme of cheap transactions through ever-increasing blocks that would make it a daily spender. And some people's Bitcoin meme for them was the concept of store of value. That second layer, Lightning and other, side chains or whatever would offer that transaction, but we need to store value, and Bitcoin as a digital gold first. From there, we've also seen other memes emerge. We've seen people emerge with this concept of the world computer that's going to run every single program and decentralized app in the world, which is the interesting thing is that the Bitcoin meme of decentralized applications that developed into the Ethereum meme is now basically 180'd back to its genesis, and is now basically they're trying to become the Bitcoin meme of store of value. This is once again another digression, but this 180 that I've seen within the Ethereum community of, I remember when I first heard about Ethereum, and another big financial mistake. I remember hearing about it in like 2014 or whatever it was when it was kind of first proposed, and they're not ICO but ICO was proposed, and I didn't really get it, and I wasn't smart enough to, but then later again in 2017 when it really took off, it was all about decentralized applications. It's all about dApps. It's all about dApps. It's all about dApps. And now it's, well, DAI or whatever is going to be used as the currency on Ethereum, and Ethereum itself is just going to be a store of value, like gold, as some sort of world financial computer. It's like this very weird transition, but I guess they have to, I guess, at this point. But anyways, so I'm not saying that I'm perfect and that I don't get riled up in transactions, actually, or transactions. That's funny. On Twitter, talking with people and communicating, because I currently am in a semi-contentious, because it just blows my mind with some of these people from the SV community, where I get somewhat to an extent their point, and I get the zeal of the meme of 0.10 was perfect, and that's all we need. But I don't understand some of their commitment to certain individuals in the space in their community. But anyways, once you understand that for a lot of people, it's the exact same as a matter of faith. These conversations will make a lot more sense to you. These where people take things to be, where people take things, interactions that they have with other people, and take them to be like personal attacks upon themselves. I think they miss the point. I think that people who aren't very zealous, you should be more wary of, and that would include myself. Like I said, I'm still wrestling with trying to exactly figure out where I think the best route for Bitcoin still is. I definitely, like I've said in more recent episodes, I'm definitely leaning more towards the concept of store of value as a better milestone to reach first, and it's a better achieved one. It seems to be the one that the consensus of people on the network and in this whole space seems to have gone towards, and I like to work with the consensus and not get against it. And also the concept of that peer-to-peer electronic cash would mean transaction finality versus actual day-to-day spending, but that kind of starts to get into hair splitting. That you should be wary of people who are not very zealous in this space, because it means that their loyalties could shift very easily, and what they say one day as being, well, this is the absolute truth, can move very quickly. Now, that's not to say that everybody's a zealot is going to be absolutely right? Because there's differing opinions. So one of these people, one of these groups, all but one of these groups, half of these groups, whatever it may be, have to be wrong, right? There's a good majority that absolutely have to be wrong, if not the vast majority and all but one have to be wrong, right? So the reason that I say that is that not to immediately dismiss anything, because if that was true, then I'd be saying just dismiss everything I'm saying, is that you need to be more careful about who you listen to and who you trust. You can always trust that a zealot is telling you the truth when they are talking about their convictions. You can't trust that they are telling you the truth when it relates to a competitor, when it relates to something that is antithetical to their belief system, because it serves their interest. They're incentivized to make that competitor, to make that which is in competition to their belief system, to be in the worst light possible. But you can always trust their truthfulness when they speak about their belief in their belief. Right? Maybe not, I should walk that back. Maybe not trust 100% their truthfulness when they are talking about that which they believe, because they will be incentivized to put that in the most positive light. But when they are talking about what they believe in, you can pretty well take that to the bank. So I want to leave you with that. It's going to be another short episode this week, but I want to leave you with that concept of don't get bothered when people react aggressively, right? I've seen some, I don't want to call out names, but I saw a certain individual that was a journalist for one of the larger publications, talking about how, we don't, most of us don't know what it's like to be them, what it's like to be, I guess, afraid or whatever, because people talk really aggressive when they're trying to talk to them about different things in this space and whatever. And it's like, one, it's online. Two, like if you're going to be covering this space and you don't understand the concept that this is a religious zeal for people, like, then I seriously think you need to kind of really do a lot more soul searching on this, but on how well you understand this space. Because if you were talking to, let's just say, a Muslim fundamentalist or a Christian fundamentalist, you would not feel taken aback when they became very passionate about their belief. You may not agree with it, but you would understand, okay, I get it. You are a passionate believer. You are speaking passionately about that which you believe. But I think a lot of these people, especially this person I'm talking about, is going like, well, it's just so aggressive, and you try to, if you say anything against their narrative, they get really angry, and it's like, yeah, of course, they've committed time, probably money, as well as just reputational risk to back a project, and a lot of these people have done so for going on. I mean, we're probably in the next 2, 3, 4 years for a lot of these people, coming up on a decade of their life. So of course they're going to be very aggressive if you are going to be countering that narrative. If you're going to be countering and disincentivizing people to believing that which they've dedicated a large portion of their life to. And I think a lot of these people just don't understand. I want you to understand that, and to not get so worked up. And like I work on that myself. Of course, if someone's, I recently had to block some folks just because people were making very inappropriate comments that were totally unrelated to Bitcoin, and that is just a no in my book, and I don't have any place for that. So anyways, let's just leave it at that. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to hit me up. You can get me on Twitter. You can Facebook, Instagram. I'm pretty much everywhere. Once again, leave a review on iTunes. Go to supportmypodcast.com to find all the other ways you can help out. Shopping on Amazon, all that kind of good stuff. Shop through our link. Also, go to supportmypodcast.com/discounts and sign up absolutely for free. And it will be free for the very foreseeable future for everybody to get discounts on all the different items that you normally would be buying in the Bitcoin space. And also one more thing, there's a ALS donation campaign coming up that I am supporting. It's Bitcoin for ALS. You can find the website bitcoinforals.com. You can sign up for their mailing list just to be notified of when it goes live. You can also go to, on Twitter, it's Bitcoin it's at Bitcoin, the number 4 ALS, and just follow them. And they're going to be doing very soon here in the future to kick off the campaign to honor Hal Finney's name. Hal was basically probably the second most important person in Bitcoin behind Satoshi Nakamoto. He was the first person to contact Satoshi on the mailing list. No one else was paying attention to this whole Bitcoin white paper at all. Hal was the first one who did so. He was the first one besides Satoshi to mine. He was the first one to receive a transaction on the Bitcoin network. He was also the first person to talk about it publicly. He tweeted out running Bitcoin. And that was the first public, basically, recognition that Bitcoin even exists. And there's so much more to Hal's story that needs to be told. He was just an all-around great person. He volunteered time to work on projects like PGP anonymously without letting anybody know, while also putting himself at risk of being put in jail for doing so, just because he believed in the cypherpunk ideals of a free, open, and anonymous or pseudonymous and encrypted internet. He was a great, great man, and I think you should support the campaign in his honor. Go to @Bitcoin, the number 4 ALS on Twitter, or bitcoinforals.com on the web. So anyways, little bit of a long outro, but I wanted to thank you guys all for listening. I've been looking at the numbers. They've been doing well, still steady. Doing well at about 5,000 to 6,000 downloads a month, which is awesome. Please share it with your friends. And the best thing, the rating and reviewing on iTunes is really it bumps up all the algorithms when people search for any kind of podcast, and that helps immensely. So I'd really appreciate it. But just overall, thanks for listening. I really, really do appreciate you guys spending your time and listening to my thoughts. So have a great night, day, or afternoon, whatever you may be doing.